Hello and welcome to SeemsToBeSo.com. This is Marian Penna and I'm going to show you today how to open Silhouette and create a coding file from your PDF files. In order to do this, you need to own Silhouette Studio Designer Edition version 3. As of version 3, we could open PDF files in the software. The free version will not do this. You must own the upgrade. When you first open Silhouette Studio version 3, it opens you to this window. You can check this so it won't show this page again, or you can leave it be. I had it checked so that it won't show this page again, but I'm going to simply explain that design and open are both the same thing. They're going to open to the design workshop area. The store is an online feature in the software where you can purchase artwork that designers have uploaded to sell. They have a subscription service. I don't see the point unless you're into paper crafts or that kind of thing. There just is no need to do this. If you're good at figuring out how to make quilt blocks without additional software, I suppose you could use that, but to me, I want all the little, I want to be able to draw it in electric quilt and bring it into Studio and do my own thing. With the library, it holds anything you purchased from the store, the shape of the week that you can download from the store, or SVG files and other type files like JPEGs, PDFs, that kind of thing. All can be saved to the library if you choose to do so. I don't save my files to the library, although I do have a library of files. I make studio files out of everything. It's just a habit for me to make files. The only things saved in my library are things I've gotten from the store. So I'm going to click open, and it's going to open me to the last folder that I was in Silhouette Studio. If you have never opened it before, it probably will open up to my documents or something like that type folder, and you can just click to the folders that you need to go to. So I'm going to open a PDF file, but as you can see here, this is a list of files that it will open, and you just need to find PDF in the list. It will not remember this the next time you go to open a file. So when you want to open your files, you just need to get in the habit of clicking this window. I tend to wish it would remember, but it does not. So I want my template, because I'm going to show you how to make, in this video, freezer templates and freezer paper templates and your fabric templates. Other types of templates, such as the layout placement, I will show you in a different video because I'm trying to keep this video short. Okay, when you have multiple page PDF files, you have to open PDFs one page at a time. So it's going to open to your first page. You can go to the second page. You can go to the third page. 3 pages is all we have. If you want to make your quality better, well, I haven't really seen what the differences are. You can change it to a better DPI. So I always do that because I know 300 DPI is a good DPI when I'm scanning. So I'm going to assume it's the same thing here, although I don't know. Electric quilt PDFs are vectorized from what I can tell. So it makes it nice in that respect because they do actually create better files in Studio and or make the cut software, as well as Inkscape, if you happen to know what Inkscape is. If you've gotten a PDF that is not cleaned up, or the keys are let's say in part of the line, you'll want to take your PDF and edit it first so that they are not in the line. What can happen is if the key letter is sitting on the line or just inside or outside the line, you end up having a double line because it's trying to bring in that whole pattern once you trace it. So you really want to try to avoid that. So the first thing you're going to do with the PDF file is you need to trace it. All it is right here is an image that it's converted from the PDF. And so we're going to go to the trace window. I use the icons, but I have seen people use, let's see, I guess it would be the object window and then trace here on the menu. I don't use the menu at all, so for me, I just know where the icons are because I just use the icons. So I want to go to the trace window and I'm going to select my trace area and I want to trace the whole thing. I do the whole thing at once. Just watched a video for a lady who does one object at a time, and I can honestly say I wish I had that kind of patience, but alas, I do not. I uncheck my high pass filter because I think I get a better image when I do. Now I want to show you what you need to be looking for here, so I'm going to zoom in at this point and just kind of work on some of these areas. You can still see the blackness through here, and this is not something we want to see. We want a nice clear yellow line. So we're going to bring up our threshold a little bit until we can get this more filled in and at a better rate. And you can look all over your image. You don't need to be looking at your keys because we're not going to be tracing these. We're looking at our outer edges here. That's what we want, as nice and clear. At this point I'm thinking that's pretty good. I don't know why it's not tracing these, but we'll trace them again if we need to. There we go. Something weird there. Okay. But all I did was click on it. So if yours happens to do that, try clicking on it and see what happens. I see a little bit of blackness in here, so I'm going to try and raise this up a bit. I'm going to show you what happens when you turn the high pass filter back on. It's going to fill it in with complete yellow. And of course, we can't see a thing this way. So if you forget and leave the high pass filter on, this number at the threshold is going to be much lower, and you need to bring it down so that it's usually going to be around 40 to 50 on your number scale. You can leave the high pass filter on, but I find you're more likely to get double red lines if I leave the high pass filter on than if I turned off. Not that there's any guarantees or anything, because there are certainly no guarantees. But I want to bring this up just enough so that I know I have all that black stuff filled in. Because that is really important. If you don't have it all in, you'll have broken lines, and that's the last thing you want. I do not like drawing in silhouette. It's not a fun experience. I think they make it harder than it should be. So, I mean, this is probably one of the most important parts of what you're going to be doing. So, take your time and get it all correct. And if you need to do one shape at a time, by all means, do one shape at a time. Okay? Alright, so I'm going to zoom this out. It looks pretty good. I'm pretty satisfied with it. I don't know what's going to happen when I click the trace. So I guess we'll just wait and see. I want to put it back to its normal size. And I'm going to click Trace Outer Edge because I don't need any of the inner stuff. So we're just going to trace the outer edge and see what happens. Once you trace it, you tell it which type of trace to do. It will bring everything up in red. And this is the real big test. We'll know once I move the image out of the way if I have double red lines or not. It doesn't look like they're there, so I'm hoping when I zoom on in, they're not going to be there. There's nothing more aggravating than seeing those double red lines. And I do not have them. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. They are not fun to get rid of. It requires a little bit of extra work. I'm a little bit worried here that these might have combined, so we'll have to see. But they're deletes anyway, because they are embroidery shapes. So I would just move them over to an embroidery tab, and I'll be showing you how to do that as well. So anyway, once you know you don't have those double red lines and everything's good to go, you can take this back to fit to size. You can come over here and delete the image. You don't need it any longer. You can leave it to the side if you want, but there's no need for it to be there. So now you want to take and you want to right click on your menu and you want to release the compound path. That's the only way to get them so that they will separate as shapes by themselves. Okay, here we can see the nodes. I guess that happens by double clicking. I never knew that. I don't mess with the nodes ever, so release compound path. And what it does is it gives you little boxes around each shape. And that's what you want to happen. You want to be able to see those little boxes so that you can move the single shapes. Okay, so I'm going to take these right here and move this up a little bit so I can grab these. And well, I don't know what these other shapes are quite yet. I'll know soon if they're embroidery files or not. But I'm going to take my Untitled Studio tab, which always opens by default in Studio, and I'm going to make it my, for now, embroidery tab. I'm just going to cut. What I did here is I selected them all with a left click drag. I right clicked and I choose cut. And then I'm going to paste, and they're going to paste into the spot they were in on the other tab. And I can move them over here. I can do what I want with them, really. They're still separate, but for now I'm going to leave them like they were. Let's take a look at these and see if they welded in together. First, yeah, see this one? This is what happens when the lettering is right on the edge or hanging about outside the edge. That's my own fault because I moved this H outside. But because I know this is an embroidery shape, right now I'm just not going to worry about it. But later, before I make the, if I were to make a file that I was going to be sharing with you all, then I would be sure to fix this problem, and this would not happen. So unfortunately, we can't share studio files by their copyright of the software, so I cannot give you the files I make in Studio. I can only show you how I make them as well. So that's why this tutorial is happening. And by the way, this tutorial is step-by-step via images on my website as well. Under the tutorial section, it's named PDF to Silhouette version 3. So you might, if you want to do it step by step, you might want to have a look at the image tutorial. Save it as PDF if you like. I didn't do that, but you're welcome to do that yourself if you wish. So, it doesn't mean you'll even like my method, who knows. But the next thing we want to do is we want to kind of separate these about. I would also, well, I first want to label, so I'm going to put these back. Now it's a really quick thing, and then I'm going to pause and label each part, because that's a really important step in my opinion, so that you know what these key letters are. So version 3 also has layers. You can see them down here at the bottom of the bar. They're probably on the object window, maybe. No, I'm not seeing them on the object window. If you should happen to see them, maybe they're in a menu. I don't know. I'm not seeing them on a menu, so maybe they're not. It seems odd that they wouldn't put them in. Oh, here we go. Under the Edit tab also is layers, but it's real handy just right down here on your toolbar. So you click on layers and you can see where it's, and you can drag it up to get them all, but you can see where it's giving you each of the shapes. And what I do here at this point is I open my PDF file, and let me just get that here real quick. Okay, this is the PDF file for the templates we're currently working. As you can see, there are 3 pages of the PDF for the template itself. I had already removed this doll has already been placed on the website, so I'm redoing this tutorial because I had some things that I no longer do in the old video, and I really didn't want to put that up on YouTube since I would have to correct those things anyway. So getting back to that, I had already removed the main doll file, so if I need it, I will open a separate file and get it. But what I'm really looking to do here is label these parts. And so what I do when I do this is, hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing here, but when I do this, I take and I give these names. So this little part here is right here, and as long as you leave everything in shape here, like I already moved the embroidery files, but remember I kept them pretty much where they were as on the PDF so that I would be able to label them. And that's why I did that, was because I knew I'd be coming back to label them. And this is the little one that is supposed to come over here and be on this one. So I'm going to move that right now. So this is part Z1. So what I want to do is I want to label this Z1. And at least for now, I know that's just part Z1. If I wanted to know where it's at on the doll, I would also label it with the part name, the shape name. You know, like if it's part of her dress, for instance, I would put dress bottom or dress sleeve or whatever part it is. At this point, I don't know. So I'm going to say it's part of the doll. Okay, so I'm going to pause and I'm going to put all of my layer names in here, and then I'll be right back. Okay, as you can see here, I have labeled them, and as I was labeling them and starting to remember what parts they were, I now know that this part, and I'm pretty sure this part are all part of the picture. They're the darker blue color in the picture. So let's just see how correct I am. I've opened up the main template file. I haven't looked, but I did scroll to the key, and I'm pretty sure I'm correct. I'm just going to kind of move these around here for you so you can see. This one here is the bottom, A2, which is right here. A2 is the bottom of the picture. So I'm going to write picture bottom. And I'll add the color as well. Now, eventually, I would make a second layer, and I'll put a third layer and fourth layer for each different color. That helps me even more down the road when I'm putting the shapes onto the mat, or laying the fabrics down on the mat. So while you might think this is a little tedious at the moment, it's actually a huge helper for you if you take the time to do it. So label them. Like, you may not realize it's a picture bottom, but you can put the dark blue so that you know you need the dark blue for that shape. The Z1 part is the picture top, the inside. So I'll put picture top. The U part is her arm. And G2 is, I'm not sure. G2 is on here somewhere. So I'm just kind of looking around real fast. If you see it, give me a whistle. Well, I'm going to give up in a second here. It's here somewhere. I'm just not seeing it, and I don't want to waste my time with looking for it, so I'm going to let it be at this point. But it's something, and I would swear it's part of the picture. I just can't believe I'm not seeing it in there. But anyway, now we want to take and we want to separate these parts. If nothing else, I would open all the other PDFs at the same time and create the second and third pages and get them done to this point as well, so that I'm ready to go ahead and add all my seam allowances, move the parts, basically speaking, onto the other one. Like you can see what I do when I make my shapes, so is that all the dark blues are going to have been right here. These are the shoe bottoms, so these are white. These are the lighter blue for the pictures. This is all flesh colors, and this is a brown or green based on whether you want it to be dirt or grass. And they're labeled that way in the PDF so that you know that they're all for that one color section. So I would go ahead and do these, but for the sake of the video, I'm not going to at this point. But you could have a bunch of tabs laying up down here, you know, as you're working on them, and you can pass the files back and forth as you get to working on them. And when you do transfer them back and forth, like we did with the embroidery, your layer names will follow as well. I will do a video just on layers though, and how they kind of work, because that's kind of a whole lesson in itself. And there are probably videos out on YouTube as well for layers and discussion of how to work with layers, moving layers back and forth. I find it so much easier to work with layer shapes in Silhouette than I do in Make the Cut. So that's the difference. Although I like Make the Cut software better. So anyway, we're now going to add our seam allowance. So we need to move our shapes around a bit so that we'll have that 1/4 inch seam allowance allowed within the shape. We don't want any shapes touching when we do this. Again, it goes back to that thing with the key file I showed you with the embroidery line, where the my PC is acting up, where it welded in, merged into the shape. That's the thing you have to be careful of when you're doing this as well, because you're going to be adding an outer line to these shapes, and you want to be sure that they don't touch each other whatsoever. So it doesn't matter, you don't have to follow the graph here. Just make sure that you have between each shape at least 1/2 inch to allow for that 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you're really don't have a lot of space to work with, you know, then yeah, you can use the graph to help you keep it within 1/2 inch, but you really want to make sure they're not touching. And when we get to adding that, I'll show you why that's important. In fact, I'll just keep apart close to each other so you can see why it's important. I'm going to move this over here a little bit so I can give my picture a little bit more room. It's got that point on it. Okay, so now we are ready to do what is called, I cannot remember at the moment, but it is this icon, offset. We are ready to add the offset, which to me is we're ready to add the seam allowance. So now we're going to select all of them. We're going to choose offset. Now as you can see, it adds a line around them. And this is why we don't want them together. I don't know if I can take and separate this or not, but you can see what's happened here. It has welded this in. Even though I have not chose to apply the offset yet, it's assuming that the offset of choice, I think, is 1.125 or something is what it does. But if this happens to you, this is why this is so cool, because you can always edit, undo. You can go up to edit and undo weld 12 shapes, or like me, you can press Control Z on your keyboard. This is what I'm likely to do. So we're back to where we were before. We're still selected. I know I need to move this shape. Undo your select first, of course, and then reselect everything. You can also press Control A and then select your offset again. And as you can see, the distance by default in Silhouette is 0.125, and there's no way to change this as something you always want to have, and there's no way, and it does not remember either. It will always default back to 0.125. You want to change it to 0.250, which will give you a corner inch seam allowance. Then you need to decide how you want these points to finish. Do you want them rounded or do you want them more pointed? I like the pointed choice. And as you can see, once I clicked on a different one, it changed the seam allowance to what I want it to be. If I go to round, it rounds off everything. I don't like round. And while some people might, I just prefer the corner. So I go with the corner. And it will square some of these corners off. And that's a good thing for cutting because you'll get a better cut on those corners than if you have points on your edges. But there's nothing wrong with points either. It just seems to do better when it gives you the little cut sides. Either or. Once you're happy with what you have here, you click apply, and you do need to click apply so that it applies that weld. I know that the weld is already in place, but you do have to click the apply. I do not know why. So the next thing we're ready to do, once we're here, we now have our freezer paper cut and we have our seam allowances. And I know you're not going to believe we have this to do this all over again, but yep, we have to do it all over again. Although we have our little ones down here, we could group them like I'll try to find this real quick. I could click on the shapes. Okay, so the two are kind of together, the face and the polygon, and you have to come out here to group them. But when you group them, what happens is you lose your name because it's taking from what's up here first as the name and combines it into a group. And if you ungroup it, it remembers, which is not something that Make the Cut does. It remembers one of the names you gave it already. So you need to do this and SA so that you know that that shape is for the seam allowance. But what I do here, I'm going to label these and then I will come back and I will show you what the next step is. I'll be right back. Okay, so now I have named all the shapes, and as you can see, I added the seam allowance here on here. I'll keep this here for a while. I may just keep it all together. It's just a helpful little note. G2 is a picture part. It's on the spout. And I've made a layer for the freezer paper and one for the seam allowances. Now what happens here is that we want all of the freezer seam allowance parts. And we want to take and we want to move those to another tab. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to cut, and as you can see, they're all gone, and we're going to open a new tab. New. Okay, and now we're going to paste into that layer. And we have them just as they were. The only thing it doesn't remember is the layer name. So I'm just going to page 1. That's the PDF page 1. So that helps me to know until I start doing all that kind of stuff. But what I do again is I come back here, I kind of put these parts back where I wanted them, so I know these colors down the road. And really you can you can put them as close as you want at this point, because this is your fabric cut and you have the seam allowances are already done, so you're good to go. We would not want this so close together, and what I might do here is I might rotate this. To rotate, you select and then you just drag your little green dot. And I would do the same with this one. I would bring this up like this. So this is where you start to have to really play around, because when you're putting several different fabrics on the mat, you do have to leave enough space for the cuts to work okay. And even though you can see here that this is okay and this is okay, if you put a piece of fabric here, you've only got pretty much this line here to get it right. So that's just not even in the cards for me. I just wouldn't even take that kind of risk. So this would probably get moved to another tab. These probably will get moved to another tab, and these would come up here, and I'd put a little piece of white. You could take and you could put your white up here, like this here, and you know you're going to need your dark blue. You'd have enough to do this, because you just want to leave yourself enough room in the fabric to make the switches of fabric, and then you just would cut yourself a little 4x4 piece of fabric and put it down here so it fits in this area to cut these two parts. Then you would do the same here. You would just need another maybe 4x4 piece of fabric. It's just dependent upon, it might be a little bit wider. 1, 2, 3, so 3x5 is this one. This one looks like 3x4 as well. It's 2.25 by 4. So you just want to make sure you have enough room to work. So I would move this down just a little bit so that I could put a whole number around. So like 3x4, not 3.5 by 4. That's just too hard to work out. You just want to make sure you have enough room to get your flesh on here. So now I just have this to worry about and getting this to work out. So I might end up going back to like this. I'll put it over here because I obviously have more room over here. And I would just line these two up together. And then I know I have this that I would need to cut out, which is 7 inches by 4. So 4 by 7 pretty much would cover this piece of fabric. Then if I have any more little parts, I could put them in here. It's not likely. So this one definitely is going to be moved to another tab. And all you do is you, like I say, just select it, cut, and you create a new tab and then paste. And it will move it over. Okay? So there you go. And it's brought over the name, so you know the layer names are just helpful for when you're cutting. But this is the important part. This is what you need to know. Okay, and then once you start getting everything in place, you can save it. You want to be sure you save your files. It's important to do that, and I'm just going to save it as this because like I said, I've already done these, so I'm just going to let them be. With the freezer paper templates, you can put these up as close as you want. The one thing I recommend here is that, and this is with the fabric as well, when you're lining up, give yourself a little bit of space in here, because it's way too easy whether you get the fabric on the outer edge here. I try not to let my fabric get on the outer edge, but if it happens, I use some painter's tape to put it down. On the other side of the coin, if I get my fabric right on the edge, I want to make sure that I've got the shape in far enough that I get that cut. But if I put it right here on the edge, then that means I've got to make sure I get that fabric right on the edge or beyond it a bit. So I always allow myself that little 1/4 inch placement in order to get everything right. Now, you could use the nesting tool in the version 3 software, but it's not perfect. And while it's really great and I love it and I can see definitely using it, what happens here with it is it goes right up to the top and you end up having to move it all. It moves some of them anyway because you do need that little bit to come down. So even if you take and you move them down that 1/4 inch, you still have to move these in. This would have to come in enough so that, you know, it isn't touching, but you want it to at least be good to go. And it's important to get your paper cuts accurate. You don't want them to be off. So if you have to move them around a little bit, at least do that. But if you have a ton of shapes on your paper, then that's a lot to deal with. And if you're cutting on 8, you need to be aware too that if you're cutting on 8 by 11 paper, you need to keep, you could put your 11 all the way across here and stop at the 11 mark. Don't go all the way to the 12, and then just make sure you don't go beyond the 8 mark. Or you can do it 8 by 11 this way as well. I use 12 by 12 paper, 12 by 15 I think it is, which is from C&T. I love that freezer paper. It's pretty much all I use now, but when I'm putting freezer paper, if I put the freezer paper on the fabric to cut on my silhouette, I use Reynolds because it's cheap and it's going to be throwaway paper anyway. So that's pretty much what you need to know with the freezer paper shapes. And so keep those things in mind, that the mat size is important. I'm trying to remember where that is. Page settings is where you set your mat. Okay. So yeah, here we go. Cutting that. You want to change to 8 by 12. And this is the room you have to work with if you have 8 by 12. And even though it's for the silhouette portrait machine, you can use the mat to help guide you get the shapes in. Then you can switch it back to the larger mat if you're using the larger mat. You just want to be sure you switch that mat so that when you go to do your cut, it knows it's doing the cameo and not the portrait machine. I believe there's another one here where you can change the, oh here, 8 by 11 is one you can do, and this one you do have to watch because it remembers, or I think it remembers anyway. So you can always do that as well. This is, it sets it to custom. There are other sizes here. We could go with this one, and as you can see, you get a little bit more room. This is the room it has you to work with. You can set it on landscape and it will switch to the other way. So it's just dependent on how you want to do it. But I love cutting my freezer paper this way. I love the accuracy I get. I find it easy to eyeball it onto the seam allowance fabric. I don't have to mark the fabric. But if you don't feel confident, then you can mark your shapes as well. The difference is that with marking the shapes, you have to have a grid for, how do I explain it? You have to have both on so that you know you're getting the accurate, when you do the marking, you do the marking first and then you do the cutting as the second option. And they both have to be there at the same time. You cannot group them, they have to be separate because the cutter will, with grouped, it will cut inside and will cut outside. So you want to be aware of that as well. So I might do a little lesson on that at some point in the future, but just keep those things in mind. Try to keep, if you're just using 8.5 by 11 paper, make sure you switch to the page size for it. And if you're doing the 12 by 12 like I do, then You don't have anything to worry about in that respect. Just put your shapes as close together as you want them. You can use the nesting tool to give you a hand and then move them around. I don't like them as close as they get with the nesting tool, so I do actually move them around. I don't mind the little bit of waste of paper I get. I don't mind the little waste of fabric either, because I'm just so appreciative to have a correct cut. So that's important to me. That's more important to me than what even the cost of the fabric was. So at this point, we are ready to go to our cut page, cut settings. And you don't really need your layers at this point, but you can keep them on hand. You can either slide them down or you can just close them all together, because you can always reopen them. So you want to just keep that in mind for layers. Okay, so when we come here, you can see it's already given us red lines for the cut, but we want to make sure. So we're going to click cut edge, and as you can see, it gives us a darker red line. Once we choose the cut, we're going to choose what kind of medium we are choosing. If you're using freezer paper, you can just choose the copy paper line, and that works fine because copy paper is lightweight paper like freezer paper. It cuts the CNT freezer paper just fine, no problem. If it were fabric, we would choose fabric. Once you choose the medium that you're cutting, I'll do copy paper to keep this accurate. You then get your knife, and it's for copy paper, it's going to tell you to put it on 2. On fabric, it's going to tell you to put it on 3. And you choose the ratchet blade, but if you were printing, you would switch to the sketch pen. It doesn't matter whether you're using a silhouette sketch pen or not. You switch to the pen because you're going to put your pen in the same place where you put your blade. Okay? And unless you're going to do layer cuttings, which we're not, even if we had the fabric in this respect, we'd still do all one cut, but we would just put our fabrics across. We would measure our fabric, we'd cut it, and we'd get it on our mat really well so that it will cut these just fine. The one thing you want to be aware of when you're doing fabric and you're doing several different ones, you do not want the fabrics to overlap. You may think that's fine, but it's not. It is better to cut it short and have them either close to meeting up or being even a 1/4 inch apart. And the reason for this is that if they're overlapping, there's the chance that the knife will drag part of that overlap back, and it will completely take off part of the cuts and screw up your cut, and then you'll be doing it all over again. So keep that in mind when you're overlapping fabric. Do not overlap the fabric so they're sitting on top of each other. Cut them short, so that's why I emphasize the differences. Even though it's a big difference, you've only got a little bit here to work with. You've got to get that fabric, say, on this line, and then bring this fabric in on this line. And you want to make sure you've got it in there well enough so that you not only cover this section here, but you're covering this as well. And maybe when these are your first times, you could move this in as well. You can have these pretty much right next to each other so that you know you're getting enough space. But once you decide to send it to the silhouette, there's no going back. You don't want to cancel it. You don't want to, well, you can't cancel it on your software. I don't know if turning off the machine would do you any good. I've never had that happen, and for as many power outages as I get, I think I'm lucky it's never happened to me. But keep those things in mind for when you're using multiple fabrics on a mat. Now, I do it all the time, so it's not a problem. But the one thing I have learned is do not overlap, because there's no way for the underneath to stick to the top unless you glue it down. And really, why would you do that? So You can't use tape. You'd have to glue it down. You wouldn't want to do that. So, I mean, I wouldn't recommend it anyway. I mean, I guess you could, but you just have to remember it when you're lifting the shapes off. So keep those things in mind for um, little tips from what I can do in video, because it'll be harder to do the fabric prep in video. So while I'm going to try, I won't guarantee a thing. So I will, once you're done, I don't have my silhouette turned on, so what's going to happen here is it's going to tell me it cannot connect. I changed my sewing room. I don't even have my silhouette hooked up right now. So, but you would click on the send to silhouette, and then you would click on the start button, and it would start. And sometimes, I think, no, I don't know. Sometimes it might auto start. So be sure you have everything set in. And the one thing I will tell you is that it is really important that this part of your machine lines up with these matte edges. You know, this is your area where this is really important to get lined up. So you can, on your machine, move these in a little bit if they're not lined up to the mat properly. So keep that in mind. It's just a slider. You don't have to do anything special. Just slide them on over. You don't want it getting into your white area. You want it to stay in the gray area. So it's important to make sure that this part is on the gray and this part is okay in the white because it's lifted off. But this drags along the mat so that it's moving the mat through the machine. That's a little extra tip for you. As much as I really tried to keep this on topic, and I am sorry that the video is so long. But I really wanted to cover all my bases. I thank you for watching. I thank you for listening. I hope you've learned something. And this is Marion Penna from seamstobesew.com. We'll see you soon with another lesson that I hope you can learn from. Bye-bye for now.